few weeks ago, I did something stupid. I took my e-bike off-roading onto a trail that was very rutted and dotted with giant rocks, and I ended up pitching myself off the bike over the handlebars onto my left side, leaving me with a sizable lump on my leg, a very painful scrape on my arm, and a head that ached for several days afterwards because I definitely slammed my brain caddy onto one of those rocks. Luckily, I wasn't quite as stupid as I could have been because I was wearing this helmet. See, it's got a lightning bolt on it, makes me go faster, apparently to my detriment. I was a bit annoyed, not just because, I was in a lot of pain, but also because I just bought this helmet and now I have to retire it. And you might be thinking, hold on, this helmet doesn't look cracked. It's just got some scratches, some nicks. Surely it's still good. But no, helmets are single-use safety items. The first time you actually need it is the last time you should use it. That's because a helmet is made up of protective foam that is held in place by this thin layer of plastic. And when you smash your helmet into a giant rock, the foam underneath compresses and cracks to absorb that energy that would otherwise be rocketing straight into your brain. And it can actually do that without the outer plastic cracking. And the only way to figure out if the foam is cracked is by slicing through it. So it's best to just replace it. Yeah, I know it's $60 down the drain, but I can assure you your brain is worth a lot more. Other people's brains are also worth more, which is why, by the way, you should cut these straps off before you throw it away, which I will be doing after this video. That way, somebody digging through your trash can't find it and wear it, or worse, resell it to some unsuspecting Facebook marketplace shopper. I had only had that helmet for less than a year because I had my previous helmet for about 8 years, and many organizations and manufacturers recommend replacing your helmet every 5 to 10 years or so. It's not because, as I used to think, that life-saving foam degrades. It's actually because the plastic shell that holds everything together is likely to degrade thanks to things like UV lights. And also the straps and the clasps that hold the helmet onto your head, those are likely to degrade as well, and you don't want them to fail. So I was sad to bid adieu to my almost brand new helmet, but I immediately got to work looking for a new one. And this time I decided to really take the hunt seriously. You see, I've been in a lot of accidents throughout my life. I rode my bike around rush hour traffic in Boston, using it as my primary mode of transportation for at least 6 years, commuting back and forth to work, taking it out to meet friends all over town, plus the occasional long weekend ride up and down the East Coast. And in that time, I've gone over the hood of a car that ignored a stop sign. I've been doored by a cab driver who didn't look before swinging his door open into traffic. I was T-boned by an SUV that pulled into a McDonald's without looking. Miraculously, in all that time, through all of those situations, plus several years riding in London and a few years playing roller derby, I've never really hit my head hard enough to wonder if I had lost a few brain cells. And now, in my old age, cycling somewhere far from cars, I managed to smack my head so hard that I had trouble focusing my eyes right away. And I had a low-level headache for a week after. And my partner was on alert for any signs that I was behaving in a more goofy fashion than usual, because concussions are no joke. As an aside, I was worried that I was actually at an increased risk of concussion because I had one when I was a kid from skateboarding without a helmet. But apparently, I looked this up, and it's only true that you're more likely to get a second concussion very soon after the first concussion. And they think that's because you're actually just more likely to be dizzy and kind of stupid after the first one. Anyway, It was all enough to scare me into paying a bit more attention to what helmet I would choose for my next one. Like, I've always just assumed that all helmets are more or less the same from a safety standpoint. After all, helmets sold in the United States and in most other countries need to conform to certain standards. Here in the US, it's the US Consumer Product Safety Commission that was enacted in 1998. And I figured if you're paying more, you're probably just paying for aesthetics or aerodynamics or a lighter weight. So I always just picked a helmet from a major brand that was certified for both biking as well as skateboarding, because I still occasionally do both. But when researching this new helmet with a new focus on keeping my brain as safe as possible, I realized that it's not quite as simple as I thought. The good news is that there have been some advances in technology in the past few years that might make helmets even safer. The bad news is that it's kind of unclear what works and how well it works. For instance, while searching, I quickly realized that MIPS was the new gold standard of helmet safety. MIPS stands for Multi-Directional Protection System, and it's essentially just a very thin lining that allows a helmet to slide around on your head a little bit for the purpose of preventing brain injury, not just due to that direct force, but due to rotational forces. Because when you get in an accident, it's not necessarily just like dropping an anvil on your head. You can be hit on the sides, the front, the back of the head, and that force can twist your head around, and thus the brain inside your head can twist around, and that can cause damage, including concussions, according to much of the research out there. So the idea behind MIPS makes sense, and it seems to have become ubiquitous in the bike helmet marketplace. If you want a helmet with more than the average amount of safety, you either get one with MIPS or a similar slip technology that various companies have put out under different trademarked names. So I went ahead and I got a MIPS helmet and congratulated myself on being such a safe and responsible adult. But then a viewer tipped me off, thank you, Don Pedro, to an ongoing conversation in the helmet industry, revealing that MIPS might not be the magical technology that I assumed. First, I realized that MIPS isn't a generic open source technology. It's a company. It was invented in the late 90s by two Swedish scientists, Hans von Holst, a neurosurgeon who was tired of seeing so many brain injuries from crashes, and an engineer who went on to study biomechanics in order to perfect what became known as MIPS. Over several years of careful testing, the two found that, sure enough, a low friction layer between your head and the helmet could significantly reduce rotational forces in angular impacts. Hooray! So they immediately patented it. Boo, boo, tomato, tomato. Look, scientist isn't necessarily the most lucrative profession, and I do not object to these guys wanting to get their cut. But compare this story to the story of another important Swedish safety invention. In the 1950s, engineer Niels Bohlin developed the three-point seatbelt for Volvo, who did patent it, but then immediately announced that the technology was completely free to use by any other manufacturer that wanted it. And in fact, they spent a huge amount of effort convincing the rest of the industry that this was an actual design that would save lives. Volvo continues to be pretty awesome in that respect to this day, as in 2019 they announced that they were releasing nearly 50 years of safety research to the general public so that other car manufacturers could take advantage of it and improve their safety. Meanwhile, MIPS can only be used in a helmet if the manufacturer pays a licensing fee. And because it's caught on as the safety feature, a lot of companies have dutifully lined up and paid out, hoping to get more customers like me, who know that MIPS means safe, so we search for that term and then we buy the cutest option that has it. But is MIPS safer? That's being hotly debated right now, with at least one large helmet manufacturer saying that it isn't. Kask is an Italian company that hasn't hopped on the MIPS bandwagon, and they've just recently started releasing statements saying that they've conducted experiments proving that MIPS is no safer than their normal helmet. To be clear, third-party research has shown that MIPS works. Virginia Tech has an entire research wing dedicated to testing and ranking bike helmets for safety. And they've given MIPS their highest marks for reducing that rotational velocity in crashes. But Kask points out that the standard testing might be flawed in MIPS' favor because they use head forms that don't actually mimic human heads. Specifically, the head forms are a bit tacky, meaning like rubbery, not out of style. And they don't have any kind of skin or hair. So why does that matter? Well, because skin and hair are like your own natural MIPS. Your skin naturally moves over your skull in exactly the way that MIPS does. So does MIPS actually make any difference if the person hitting their head actually has skin? Kask says it doesn't. And further, they say that they've been doing tests with a far superior head form that shows that their own helmets perform just as well as helmets with MIPS. Unfortunately, because capitalism, again, they haven't released all of their testing data, so we don't know how well other helmet brands performed with these superior head forms. And we don't yet have independent data from researchers like those at Virginia Tech using those head forms. So we have to take all of this with a grain of salt. That said, personally, I don't regret getting a helmet with MIPS. I got it on sale. It actually cost $20 less than my last MIPS-less helmet. And I honestly don't really care about aerodynamics or ventilation, which are factors that some people say make them avoid helmets with MIPS, although other people say that newer MIPS helmets are just as good in those realms, so none of the data I've seen suggests that MIPS makes helmets less safe, and at least one group of independent researchers found that MIPS does work even when taking into account some of Kask's concerns about the head forms. These researchers didn't have that new model that Kask used, so instead they modified the old head forms with nylon stockings and wigs to mimic skin and hair. And they found that, yes, skin and hair helped rotational forces in the same way that MIPS does. But additionally, they found that they still found an added benefit by adding the MIPS to the skin and hair. So, to sum up, we need more research, and we need more independent open source research. And also, I need to stop zooming up hills that I have absolutely no business zooming up. I think we've all learned a lot from this incident.